Hello guys, welcome to the second episode of this video series. Today we will be talking about our applications architecture. We want to keep things simple and therefore we will not get into the details of the MVC design pattern, but we will discuss it from a general perspective. After that, after we have a basic understanding, we will see how this design pattern guides us through the architecture or come up with the architecture of our application. All right, let's get to it. So what is the MVC design pattern? The MVC design pattern is an architectural software design pattern that allows us to separate or to decouple an application into three main logical components. And we can see those components depicted here. Those components are the model, which deals with the data, the model, the view, which controls or defines the user interface, and the controller, which controls, as the name implies, the interaction between the model and the view. Now, because this pattern breaks the application down into smaller independent pieces, it allows for ease of modification. So if later on we want to extend our application, we want to scale our application by adding more features, we can do so relatively easy. Although this design pattern is very popular in web development, we will see how it fits perfectly for the architecture of our application. There are slight variations of this design pattern, and the one that we will be using for our case is depicted here. We see in a more detailed fashion the interaction that takes place between the various different components, uh, starting from the user interface or the view. The user writes or requests to the controller. Then the controller receives those requests and it takes the appropriate actions. Those actions may involve notifying back or notifications back to the view, or it can relay those requests onto the model for further processing, or it can do both. Now, if the model receives a request from the controller, then the model will process those requests, and any updates, any results derived from those processes will then be communicated back to the view, thus completing the loop. And this is exactly what is happening in our application. First, we as a user will interact with the user interface or the view, and by making selections or entering data, we are requesting to the controller, which is the code, which is the logic that we will design and write to appropriately route those requests from the user interface. Now, the model is the code that ultimately is responsible for processing the data and for filling the view or updating the user interface. This update sometimes might be in the form of updated values by disabling input fields or by disabling buttons, as we saw in the demo section in the last video. Now, if you want to have a look at it, then will post a link to that video in the top right corner. So that's pretty much it in regards to our application architecture. Just as recap, we want to see what we have learned in this episode. Now, we've gone through a general overview of the MVC design pattern, the benefits that provides us, and the why it helps us to create applications that are maintainable and scalable. These two characteristics are very, very important when it comes to designing good software. Oftentimes, applications fail because adding new features and maintaining the code becomes a nightmare. The MVC design pattern helps us to avoid just that. We also defined the architecture of our application based upon the MVC design pattern. Now, even though we only scratched the surface of the MVC pattern in application architecture, I realized that it is a lot. It is a lot to take in. So if for some reason you don't completely understand these concepts at this point, just do not worry. We will come back to it and it'll become clear once we implement each of those components. Now, if you want to investigate further on the MVC pattern, I will post a link in the description below, which I've personally found very, very useful. Yeah, that's it for today's episode. And in the next, we will start building our 3D model, our 3D CAD model, which incidentally is part of the model section in the MVC design pattern. Yeah, that's it. Until next time, thanks for watching.